I think, isn't weather random?
Weather is random.
Yes. It's not arbitrary.
So arbitrary is you make a decision that's kind of an arbitrary decision, but random is a pattern that has no consciousness behind it.
I think the word pattern is important. I think randomness, there are patterns to randomness, but not to arbitrary things. I think that's the difference. Oh, we really should be doing a quick little internet search in order to prevent having to make apology notes. And now I need my glasses. Oh my God, middle age. Okay. Oh, no, that's not right.
What's not right?
Well, I just don't trust these answers.
Is this one of those moments where, they're giving you answers, but they're wrong?
Yeah, because they're not what I thought. Oh my God. See, it's also, it opens up a mathematical world, which... Oh, no, I don't believe that. Yeah, so arbitrary, they're saying it's a synonym, but in maths, the difference is that random is relating to probability distributions, while arbitrary is any and all possible. So, yeah, it's kind of what we were saying, really.
Oh,
random is having unpredictable outcomes.
Right.
But anyway, let's not talk about this.
Because language is just so weirdly slippery. I love it. But we were talking about this in relationship to Italian, weren't we?
Yes. I was speaking with an Italian friend yesterday. We're talking about something, right on the edge for me in terms of my level. So reasonably complex, and also much more hypothetical things, which always get, they're slippery in your own language. Yeah. And I was trying to communicate the idea that even though this person had understood what I'd said, it didn't mean for a second that it was what I'd wanted to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'd been trying to say something and she'd said, yes, I understand. And I'm thinking, well, do you? Because I'm not sure I have the language to articulate.
But do you not think that you just find yourself in that moment in a second language that you are still mastering, actually capturing what happens in conversation?
Exactly.
You are saying something and there is a level of interpretation that is happening by the listener, and you hope that interpretation is close enough to what the interior complexity or perhaps...
or simplicity.
Of your interior world. You hope that it kind of somehow maps onto that.
Yes, in fact, I would say the problem in this case is not so much that it's that issue is really transparent when you're speaking another language, but actually that it's not transparent when you're speaking in your own language, that we forget that that's going on. We have definitely talked about this before. It seems to be a sort of an ongoing theme. It's incredible. In fact, part of the conversation was around the word assumption, and I was trying to use the word assumption, which they don't have. It's more like, I'm going to get corrected again, but like ipotesi, like hypothesis is probably, and it just doesn't sound right to my ear. Like it doesn't, the translation doesn't sound right.
Well, this is the weird thing about English, isn't it? It's a cluttery old mess. We've got bits of language here that are from all over the place. We don't just have kind of like one, it's not just Latin at roots, is it? It's not like the Romance languages. So that means that when we hear a word that borrows from a Romance language that might have more nuance in its originary form, like hypothesis, it really only means one thing here. Yeah. In English, it only means the one thing.
Yep, and the context is quite narrow.
Exactly, You wouldn't hypothesize in a shop.
Unless you're a little bit snooty. My hypothesis this morning is that I'm going to buy the Daily Mail instead of the Guardian.
Yeah, so I mean, you could press it into service, but as you say, it's
press it into service. What was that? They gang. What was they called? Gang.
Press gang.
Press gang.
The press gang. Yeah, when people were needed for the Navy.
Wow.
And it was one of those really weird double binds, wasn't it? Whereas if you resisted, you were imprisoned, and if you didn't resist, you were put in the Navy. So it's like, okay,
it was win-win depending on whose side of the.
This is a podcast in which two friends have serious conversations about silly things and silly conversations about serious things.
I'm Simon Ellis.
And I'm Lee Miller.
Welcome to Midlifing. compressing a word into service. And I definitely do that all the time when I'm trying this other language of mine because and they go, no, we wouldn't say that. I'm going, well, I'm trying to use it in a way that I know that it's more like a metaphor. And okay, but that's not how we'd use it.
Yeah.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I am so far behind you in my Portuguese.
It is a race.
To your,
it is a race.
Well,
it is a race. I've actually stopped to have a little drink and see how far back you are.
You started like about 6 or 7 years before I started. So I hadn't even bought any shoes.
Don't give me a... You don't even have any running shoes yet.
No. But we were talking...
And instead, you didn't buy the running shoes, you bought the flat.
Yeah, okay, so...
You actually bought the metal dais.
Yeah, we invested in a different way. But we were talking to our downstairs neighbour. Who?
Hang on, is this in Portugal or is this in England?
Portugal, yeah. No, we don't have a downstairs. Do we have a downstairs neighbour?
Well,
I was thinking, kind of do, because in our house, it's constructed of something called flying freehold, which means a bit of our property is sitting on top of somebody else's property. So technically, where I am sitting right now is above a gallery space in the on the high street.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So we do have a downstairs neighbour here, although I wouldn't think of her in that way.
Yeah.
The legal language to describe our flat is an autonomous fraction. They don't have.
Hang on, and this is in this country or the other country?
No. In Portugal, we're called an autonomous fraction. Yeah, which means the way Portuguese law works. You imagine that an apartment block is like a cake, and when you go into a shop and you buy a piece of cake, you don't rent the cake in order to eat it, but you buy the cake, yeah? In the UK, when you have a property in a block of flats, you're effectively renting it long term even though you own it, if that makes sense, because you buy
you're renting
leasehold.
The cake long term in order to
you're
live in a slice of it.
Exactly that, yeah, because
it's so weird.
It's the leasehold, so you own the right to live there, you don't own the bricks and mortar. Anyway, it's an autonomous fraction in Lisbon, and our downstairs neighbour, who has moved to the United Arab... I can never say this right. The United Arab Emirates. There are too many letters in that.
Mm-hmm. You didn't have any problem with that word last week. There were a lot of letters in that word.
Psychoneuroendocrinology.
Yeah, no problem with that one. But UAE.
Yeah, UAE. I think it's because there's a B and an M near
United Arab Emirates. Oh, those, the B and the E.
Because I want to say the United Arab Emirates, and it's like, that's not right.
You should practice some of your drama techniques. The tip of the tongue,
I have to do a virtual open day in not very long, and that's some of the shit that I'm going to have to talk about.
You should just come out and say, hi everyone, United Arab Emirates. It's a very difficult fraction. And tell me, what is the difference between random and arbitrary, dear friends?
Oh, yeah. But I was talking to them, and they were saying, we're going to Faro this afternoon, which is about 3.5 hours from Lisbon. They were driving down to the coast to see friends. And then we saw them later that afternoon, still in the garden. And we were like, I thought you were going to Faro. And they went, oh, yeah, the car broke down. And both Bob and I responded, sinto muito, which means, like, oh, that's a big shame.
Yeah.
And they pissed themselves laughing. We're like, what's wrong? Sinto muito it means that that's a big shame. They were like, yeah, but you kind of say it if someone's died. You don't really say it if someone's car's broken down. So you just escalated our car breaking down. And it was one of those moments where it's like, yeah, that technically is the right thing to say. But contextually, no, not so much.
We had a similar word this morning. Oh, this is the word podcast. I think in Italy they use the word mortificare, a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I was mortified. I mean, we say that, right? But I think it's
very rarely.
Very rarely.
It feels like the kind of thing that a grandma would say, isn't it? It's like it's a bit pearl clutchy. I was mortified. I can't believe you just did that to me, Simon. I was mortified. I was so embarrassed.
You've taken on your tea lady from Edinburgh.
I'm a nice lady from Morningside's come back.
Yeah. So it's it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing the way we communicate, isn't it?
Mortificado. Did I say that badly?
O care.
Care.
Yeah, mortificare.
Mortificare.
Ah, it's got a
Mortificare.
slight Portuguese
Oh,
twang.
it's not even a slight. It's a full on. I was trying to say a student's name the other day that I was convinced was Portuguese.
Oh no!
And while it was a Portuguese name, and I was saying it with a Portuguese accent, she's not Portuguese. she's like, what? And that's not how I say my name. It's like, oh, that's interesting because that's how I would say. It's like, yes, but it's my name, so maybe that's. Well, yeah.
I've a memory of a friend who was doing some, what do you call it? Backup teaching. No, what do you call that? Covering, something like that. Thank you. And I think it's called.
Word?
I think it's called something else in Australia, New Zealand.
I think it might be called something else here.
Like substitute. Substitute.
Teaching. There you go. Substitute teaching.
And it was in the middle of nowhere in Australia. When I mean the middle of nowhere, I mean the dead centre of Australia, like right in the red heartland, you might say, where it's just empty. Beautifully empty. And I was reading out the class names and reading out the list at the beginning. All the students were going, yes, yes. And read out one, which was Phoebe, and nothing. Mm-hmm. And after she'd finished the list, the little girl came up to her and said, "You didn't read out my name, miss." And she said, "What's your name?" "My name's Phoeb."
Oh.
Yeah, and isn't it beautiful? It's beautiful that her parents had liked that name, the look of that name, and that's how she'd been called. And it speaks so much about the mess of letters and language and difficulty. And who gives a shit if your name's Phoebe or Phoebe, right?
You know that there will be that will have hit somebody's ear, and they will have gone, "Oh God, can you imagine being so uneducated that they didn't?" And you just kind of go, "Oh wow."
Yeah, to be surrounded. I was surrounded. Oh, it's beautiful. I was
quite lovely.
It's clear that I was surrounded by people talking and reading and doing stuff that my very early years were just filled with language.
Yeah, I was not in the same way.
Because you weren't the youngest of four.
No, exactly. I was an only child, but I was a voracious reader. And so everything I encountered was internal.
So you never got to hear it.
No, so I remember understanding the concept of Deus Ex Machina. I was probably around about 11 or 12 that I came across it it was in a Stephen King short story.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember what short story it was, but it was the idea of the magic bullet. He writes quite a lot about writing. I don't know again, Stephen King is one of those people that I think we're supposed to sneer at in lots of ways because he's so prolific in his output.
Also, and successful.
I still like him. There's a beautiful short story novella that he wrote not long ago called Elevation. This guy, he slowly stops having mass until eventually he floats away.
Oh.
But anyway. But he was writing about the idea of God in the machine, Deus Ex Machina. And I said it out loud to somebody who...
out. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So go.
I think you can... I think it's God out of the machine or yeah. Anyway, God... Is it God out of the machine?
I don't know.
Or God in the machine. But it basically...
I don't read Stephen King, for fuck's sake.
But the principle of it comes from Greek theatre, doesn't it? That all of a sudden there would be a literal God that comes in a machine, like a crane kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of Medea. Now, why are you laughing?
Because I really like the sense that you have a very high opinion of how cultured I am. I was a tennis player, then I became a dancer. Let's be clear.
Well, at the end of Medea, she borrows her granddad's chariot. By this point, she's killed Glauce, Jason's new wife. She's left Jason, sort of screaming on the floor because
bad things are going on. That's for sure. Yeah.
And she's flying away in a chariot. And I think that it's that sort of idea that it's a literal machine of the gods that moves her out of harm's way.
Right.
So God in the machine or God out of the machine. I can't remember the Latin of it. But I remember saying Deus Ex Machina out loud, but I didn't say Deus Ex Machina because I'd never heard it and I'd never been taught Latin.
You say machina?
Oh, I said juice.
Oh.
Because I was like, that looks a bit like French. and you would say so I was trying to imagine what the word would look like if I,
lovely.
So I had a little bit of schoolboy French. That was like Deus ex machina, and this guy who had gone to a private school, older than me, gone to a private school and had Latin. He just looked at me and went, "That's not how you say that." And it was a moment of deep shame for me, kind of going, "Huh," and then it took a little while to unpick that and go, I didn't have a Latin master. I haven't been taught Latin, but I understand the concept of Deus ex machina. And instead of wanting to engage with the conversation that we were having, he wanted to step out of the conversation and ridicule me for how I pronounced it, as opposed to just, what you could do is just like really polite, well, not even politely, just with clarity say, oh, this is how you say it. You don't say it like that, you say it like this. And there'd be no shame attached to that. It's just like, oh, I'd never heard it said out loud.
There's a little bit of that at conference, isn't it, about, well, when you get to pronounce people's names from another country, people who are well-known theorists or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've always taken a certain amount of pleasure in saying them wrong. And just letting it, and then also I used to do that also teaching. I'd say, on purpose, say words incorrectly, so that there was a sort of sense of playfulness with how it was that we were using language, and that there wasn't any kind of sense that we had to be right about that, because frankly it didn't matter. What we're talking about is ideas here.
Yeah.
As long as you understand that I'm talking about this particular person, it doesn't matter, right?
It's just a breadcrumb, isn't it?
It's just a breadcrumb. It's exactly. It's a window into that.
Yeah. None of this was what I was going to talk about, but I suppose it's not dissimilar in a way about. Okay. Last week was the Golden Globes. Did you know that?
I had heard that.
And did you see that our good friend Jason Sudeikis won an award?
I didn't. I think I might have clocked that name of show, insert name of show here, won an award.
Yes.
Was it that? Did he win an acting gong?
I believe he won an acting gong, best actor in a comedy series for his titular role in Ted Lasso.
Oh, I couldn't remember the name of the show. After all, okay. And
he gave a speech. And
remotely, right?
Yeah, everybody was remote. Well, I think everybody was remote. Now, I'm not sure. There might have been some people who weren't remote. Anyway, he was definitely remote because he's filming the second series here in the UK.
Oh.
Obviously, he was on British time, and the award ceremony is on American time. So
in the West Coast, right?
Yeah.
So there's an 8-hour difference.
Yeah, he's 8 hours ahead. So, if they
middle
were doing
of the night.
I was going to say, if they were doing it in the evening, if they were doing like 8 o'clock at night,
yeah, it's 4 a.m.
Well into, exactly. Yeah. He'll be well into the morning.
Yeah.
So he was a little bit sort of, well, I was going to say, let's just say he maybe wasn't as laser-like in his initial responses. And lots of people kind of piled on to kind of go, oh, what a rambling acceptance speech. But I watched it, and I was really delighted that I watched the acceptance speech, because it reminded me of something I'd read ages ago that I don't know if you've read, which is the Leo Tolstoy short story about the 3 questions.
This is why I said yes to doing a podcast with you, is because I thought, I'm going to learn some shit, so go.
Well, he'd been reading the same short story to his son.
What is it called?
Oh, I can't even remember the name of it. We'll have to put it in the show notes. But it's something like the 3 questions or the 3 answers.
I'm going to look it up. I'm looking it up now as you're talking.
But it's by Leo Tolstoy, and it's lovely, and it's not a long read, but it's a beautiful read. And he gave this acceptance speech that sort of finished off with remembering that he'd been reading this to his kid. And basically, the questions are something along the lines of, when is the right time? Who do I need? And what's most important? So those are the 3 questions.
It's called the 3 questions.
Oh, I remembered it right. Lovely. Oh, didn't remember it right, but said some words that were approximating it. So this king goes to all of the wisest people in the land, brings them in and asks them these same 3 questions. When's the right time? What do I need? And who is the most important? They're a little bit longer and a little bit more involved than that when he asks them, but that's the kind of the central thrust of the questions. And he gets like loads and loads and loads of different answers, and none of them really satisfy him. And then he obviously decides the only way to answer this is to go off and talk to the hermit who lives in the woods.
Which is always, isn't it? That's always the. What am I going to do? Oh, I know. Why don't we do that these days? We go to the internet. It's stupid.
Yeah, which is not a hermit that lives in the woods, is it?
Although it would be so great.
It's a guy who lives in someone's cellar. So
it's Amazon Web Services that there's a extension for your browser which blocks websites if they use one of Google, Amazon, and I can't remember the other one, maybe it's Facebook, services of any kind, and it basically renders the internet unusable. It's just a really, even if you think that you're not involved in, say, the business of supporting Amazon or your favorite billionaire, Emperor Bezos, that you're in the business of it. It's inescapable.
Yeah.
Sorry, 3 questions.
Yeah. Anyway, so he asked these 3 questions of the hermit. When's the right time? Who do I need? And what's the most important? And the hermit's digging his garden and doesn't answer the questions. And the king asks the questions again, and he still doesn't answer the questions. And then the hermit's like, I'm a bit tired. I'm gonna have a sit down. And then the king just goes, just give me the spade. I'll do some digging for you. All right, if you'll just answer the questions. So he starts digging. And then they get later into the night, and the hermit still hasn't answered the questions. And then somebody comes along with a stomach wound, and he's like really heavily bleeding from his stomach. And the king goes, "Shit, okay, get me some towels. Let's try and staunch this bleeding." And they staunch the bleeding and put the man to bed. And then the king passes out on the doorstep because he's so tired. And he wakes up in the morning, and the guy who was wounded was an enemy of the king who had set out deliberately to kill the king, and then had encountered one of the king's bodyguards on the way, who had then sort of given him this
wound.
Yeah, and then the king had saved his life, and then the enemy says, "Now I don't want to be your enemy. I want to serve you for the rest of your life, and I will want my children to serve you as well." We all live happily ever after. And the king goes to the hermit, I still haven't got the answer to the question. He's like, "Well, actually, you have. You have got answers to the questions, because when is the right time? Now is the right time. And who do I need? You need the person who's in front of you. What's the most important? Well, the most important thing is the thing that you're doing." And the reason Jason Sudeikis is talking about it was he was offering a critique of the idea of the best actor as a concept. He said, because I don't really think that I was the best actor. I think that I was in the right moment. And I think I was doing the thing that I was doing. And I think I was acting opposite the people that I was acting opposite. And that's what allowed this thing to happen. So I guess I wanted to talk about community. In the broadest sense, or in the narrowest sense, or how does that sit with you?
It's funny. I just this morning I was just listening to something which said that it was someone reporting on a bit of research that had happened at Harvard, and I'm only saying Harvard there because I couldn't really give a dead rat's Roger. But isn't it interesting when you say some research that happened at Harvard implies that the research is good, as if no crap research ever came out of Harvard. Anyway, this bit of research said that we spend nearly 49% of our time effectively lost in thought. And the word lost being critical here, meaning not I'm thinking about this, but the mind wandering. I thought that was pretty fascinating, pretty interesting in terms of the 3 questions. Yeah, what was when is it? When is it? When do I need?
So when's the right time?
When's the right time? Exactly. But that's not what your question is. It's a very interesting thing, community in general. And I think it became most interesting for me when friends of mine started having children. And the sense that by necessity, or inevitably maybe is a better word, by necessity, that when you have children, there's a strange a paradox, I think, that I observed happening. I don't know whether they felt this happening, whereby there's a closing in of the world. We need to, let's say, focus our attention on this new human being, at the same time as recognizing or hoping for the kind of world they might grow up in.
It takes a village.
It takes a village, exactly. I guess I've been aware of that as I've got older. I've become aware of I'm going to call it the temptation. Lil always teases me about my use of the word temptation, because she does. You do use the word in a very unusual situations like, I'm tempted to have some toast now. And I swear, I go, what's wrong with that? Like, why is it that we're not tempted by toast?
I think perhaps it's because Lil doesn't have quite the relationship to bread that we both have. Because I hear you say tempted, and I'm like, yes, because I walk past that bread bin and I can hear my my freshly baked sourdough going,
go on.
I know you're not hungry, but imagine what it would feel like to crunch into me and have salt
and I know you're
into
supposed to
your
wait until it's cold before you can cut the thing, but I'm so nice when I'm a little bit warm.
Who has ever done that? Who has ever waited until they've actually got a cold loaf? I know it's easier to cut, but fuck off.
Yeah, the temptation as I've got older to feel increasingly isolated, to this is the way the world is.
Yeah.
That community takes a kind of work.
Yeah.
And even if we can't even whether we agree on what that word might mean, but let's say we are agreeing on what it means, but that to be outside of oneself, to spend time building something that is beyond that, let's say, easy circle or easy closeness is demanding work.
Can I just circle back to the thing that you said about it takes a village and the being part of a community that becomes necessary when you have kids, and the sense that you feel the temptation to become more isolated and recognizing that is a thing to work on.
It's funny when you said temptation, the word that did come to mind was toast, I have to say. But yes, you're right. Yep.
I don't really know what I want to ask. It feels like that we just sort of cracked something big open about the fact that neither of us have children.
Yeah.
And about what that might mean in relationship to our standing in a community. Mm-hmm. Or perhaps the potential for being seen as we become more invisible. Because as we get older, I think we understand, certainly in this culture, in the UK, the older you are, the more invisible you become.
Yeah.
And is there an anxiety there about disappearing? So are you kind of being insular because you're kind of beating society at large to the punch?
I think I'm making a virtue out of necessity.